Big News Morgans is a former member of the Roger Pirates. In other words, a member of the most powerful and influential pirate crew in history. Someone who fought side by side with the likes of Shanks, Rayleigh, and Roger himself, reaching the last island of the Grand Line. And just like Shanks, Crocus, or Rayleigh, he has worked hard behind the scenes to make Roger's last will come true and has helped Luffy to get where he is today, using his influence on the world government and his monopoly on information in the One Piece world. This sounds, of course, absolutely preposterous, and I thought the exact same thing when I first stumbled across this idea on my subreddit Wild Anime Theories. However, as the Reddit user Legendary points out correctly, there is actually surprisingly much evidence pointing in exactly that direction. And when you follow the breadcrumbs that Oda Sensei left us, it only leaves us with one possible conclusion. Big News Morgan is very likely a Roger pirate. To be more precise, he's one of these men right here. I'll tell you why in just a second. Also, if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe. It's actually free. Big News Morgan is not just anyone, but one of the most influential and powerful people in the world. And we really have no idea what he actually looks like. After all, Oda Sensei has confirmed that Morgans isn't some type of intelligent animal, like, for example, a member of the Minx tribe, but a human that has eaten the bird zone fruit model albatross. In other words, similar to Chopper, Morgan is constantly in his hybrid form, so he could be someone we've seen in the story before without us ever realizing it. Here's what we know so far about Big News Morgan. He's the president of the World Economy newspaper. In other words, he's the one who prints the newspapers that are being distributed across the world by the infamous News Coup. That's the name of these birds that distribute the news across the One Piece world. While Morgans and his team look and feel very quirky, you shouldn't let yourself be fooled here. He is incredibly powerful. This world is fully controlled by a global world government that not only rewrites history to fit its own purposes, but also goes extremely hard against anyone trying to share truths and news that could harm its power. I mean, just ask the scholars of Ohara. Controlling information and keeping the citizens of the world badly informed has probably been the government's most powerful tool to stay in power for the past 800 years. And yet, here we have this man that runs the world's biggest newspaper. That makes Morgan one of the most dangerous and influential people on the planet. I'm really curious why the government has allowed him to build such a monopoly in the first place. My personal guess would be that Morgan used to play along very nicely with the government and kind of help them spread their propaganda. I mean, we've already seen that the government tried to bribe him and that they had an undercover agent at his office. And so it really feels like it was only quite recently that Morgans has gone so openly against the Gorosei. Another reason, however, is that Morgans is one of the emperors of the underworld, where the government, countries, and pirates all together trade weapons, information, and really anything else that's shady and imaginable away from the public eye. Not only does he have the power to shape global opinions about anything, but he can also blackmail others by sharing sensitive information. Literally, for many years, he was part of the system that helped the Yonko and the government alike in controlling the news and cementing their power. And even though his influence is mostly through information, he's also physically quite strong, having no problem whatsoever dealing with the 𝙻𝚎𝚐𝚐 agent that threatened him or standing side by side with some of the strongest people in the story. Heck, he knew exactly that Stussy was an undercover agent as well and what she was capable of, and yet he was not in the slightest intimidated by her presence. It was really only at the end of Whole Cake Island that Morgan started doing his own thing here. He revealed his interest in the supernova and started cheering for Luffy in particular to become the next pirate king. Now, you could of course argue that all of these things could simply be the characteristics of a cunning and tough journalist who just wants to get money and I guess excitement out of it for himself. However, this is where things get a little bit fishy. First of all, what we mentioned earlier, it's really strange that he never leaves his hybrid form. This is clearly to protect his true identity in some way or form. The only question is, who could Morgans be that would be so problematic for his job? It must be someone who would get him into trouble either with the government or cost him his credibility with his readers. Also, this journalist who has a secret identity should be pretty familiar to you because it's basically the Superman trope. Now, I don't think that Morgans is the lurking legend or anything like that, but I do think that this is Oda-sensei's take on that Superman trope. And his fruit itself is also quite suspicious too. Morgan is an albatross devil fruit user. The albatross is notorious for its long-distance flying abilities, and yet Morgan here allegedly can't fly. We also do know for a fact that Morgan was the one who reported on Luffy's exploits on Whole Cake Island and who declared him as the next emperor before he made his way to Wano. In fact, we can assume that it was his newspaper that has been distributing news about the Straw Hats' exploits throughout the story. And as far as I remember, the Straw Hats have always been portrayed in quite a positive light, presented as this powerful crew of upcoming pirates that bring turmoil to wherever they go. And while it's still unclear whether or not Morgans has any influence on the bounties themselves, he still seems to be the one to print and distribute all bounty posters. I mean, he clearly was the one who put the photo of Gear 5 Luffy on the new Wanted poster and has also included the D in his name. And so all of that strongly hints at Big News Morgan having a secret agenda and a secret identity. However, why do I say with such certainty that he might be a Roger pirate in disguise in particular? Well, you better put your seatbelt on for this one. Let's begin with the matter of Roger finding the One Piece and becoming Pirate King in the first place. I mean, since it's the premise for the entire story, I think none of us has ever really stopped and questioned how Roger got so famous in the first place. Because when you think about it, it's kind of fishy too. Roger was the first person in 800 years to reach the last islands. There, he found the One Piece and named the island Laugh Tale, based on Joy Boy's story that he read there. However, why would anyone believe him? Who confirmed with certainty that this actually happened and that Roger didn't just make it up? In other words, someone had to actually tell the press that this happened because Roger clearly wasn't the one who told the world, and if he did, nobody would have believed him. We also saw that he was reading the epithet Pirate King in a newspaper himself and found it amusing, so clearly it wasn't his idea. And the easiest explanation here is that the news about Roger were spread by someone who was actually there. In other words, a journalist who accompanied Roger on his trip, either because Roger was nice enough to let him, or because Roger himself just wanted to make a bit of a name for himself. And I do believe that this person was Morgan, the man who became famous for breaking the story and naming Roger Pirate King. This would also explain Morgan's crazy obsession with Luffy and the race for the next Pirate King perfectly as well. As you know, Roger was waiting for the return of Joy Boy, and in anticipation of his death, he did everything in his power to ease the way for his return. He fathered at least one child with Ace that he hoped would become Joy Boy later. He then tasked his men with carrying on his will and prepare Joy Boy's arrival. He sent out Shanks to find the right person and get his hands on the Nika Nika fruit. Shanks was to give that person the fruit and entrust him with Roger's hat. He then stationed Crocus at the entrance to the Grand Line to scout for the person with the straw hat, tell them about the final island, and teach them how to navigate the first half of the Grand Line. He then stationed his right-hand man Rayleigh at the halfway point on Sabaody. Rayleigh, in the very same manner, would also identify Joy Boy by its hat, train him, and then help him cross into the New World, the second part of the Grand Line. And one possibility is that his third in command, Scapa Gaban, is now waiting on Roadstar Island to teach Joy Boy about Laugh Tale and the final journey there, but I guess that's a story for another video in itself. Because as you figured out by now, Morgan would fit this pattern perfectly. He has helped to spread Luffy's legend. He's the one who declared him an emperor and who believes that he will be the next Pirate King. Now, we've heard many people believe in Luffy finding the One Piece and becoming Pirate King before, but Morgan, at least as I remember, is the only one that has never met Luffy in person and still believes it. Why? Well, because he also recognized Roger's Straw Hats. And so Morgan has made sure to favor Luffy in public perception and ease his way. How so, you may ask now? Well, remember how Rayleigh, Shanks, and co keep up with Luffy's developments? We've seen Shanks more than once read about Luffy in the news. For whatever reason, it seems to be his trusted source of information about Luffy. I personally would assume that you would also expect Shanks to keep an eye on Luffy in some other way, but he seems suspiciously content with just a regular newspaper. Well, if Morgan was his former crewmate, part of the same mission to help Joy Boy, then of course Shanks would trust that information. Heck, Morgan most likely would put it there for members of the Roger crew to see in the first place. In this context, I also want you to think about the aftermath of the war at Marineford. Luffy returns to Marine HQ to literally send a message to the rest of the crew to train for 2 years and meet back at 𝙬𝚎𝚐𝚐 strong enough to make it to the world, blah blah. But that wasn't actually Luffy's idea. Yep, you guessed it. It was Rayleigh's. Rayleigh proposed to Luffy to get a picture taken at Marineford with the message on his arm visible to the cameras. And it was Rayleigh who accompanied him there. Yes, it was a real ballsy stunt of Luffy to come back, but there was absolutely no guarantee that it would make the news or that they would use that exact picture of Luffy with the message clearly visible. What if the government wanted to cover this up as well, avoiding the humiliation of having Luffy back there and having him escape a second time? However, if Morgan, the one curating the news here, was an ally of Rayleigh, then of course he could ensure that the Straw Hats receive Luffy's message. In other words, Rayleigh and Morgan could have staged the entire thing as a massive media stunt. Luffy rings the bell, lays down flowers, and then takes his hat off to pay respect to those who have fallen, while the Marines charge in there in the background like idiots. The reporters really have no chance but portray Luffy as the noble, mysterious rookie who has come with Jinbei and Silver's Rayleigh, and one of the reporters literally says, "This is big news." Morgan's catchphrase before we ever get to even meet him. And once again, we see the Marines reacting to this news breaking, saying that the article already has spread around the world and is too late to stop. So once again, just like on Whole Cake Island and on Wano, news about Luffy gets out that the government wants to keep quiet. And Morgan being a Roger pirate also would explain one of the biggest plot holes in the entire story. Why the hell is Luffy's full name always displayed on his wanted posters? We do know that the Gorosei want to keep the D initial a secret, including for Luffy, as we well learned after Wano. Yet Luffy has been wanted as Monkey D. Luffy on every single bounty poster so far. I mean, the government wanted to hide that D initial so hard, they even bothered to rename Goldie Roger into Gold Roger. They also surely wanted to hide Luffy being related to Garp. So if the government would have had its say, I bet that Luffy would have been just Luffy on the bounty posters, just how Shanks is just Shanks. But then if you have someone in the news accidentally publishing the D initial, however, who operates on his own terms and who wants the D clan out in the open, that would explain a lot. Morgan really is the missing piece linking Rayleigh and Shanks and the other members of the Roger Pirates that are now working to make Luffy the next Pirate King. And the reason that Oda Sensei hides his appearance is because we've now met all of Roger's crew through Oden's flashback. And age-wise, it also fits pretty smoothly because he was in his early 20s during Roger's journey to Laugh Tale. So, who out of Roger's men here could Morgan possibly may be. I have 4 candidates for you. First is this guy here, Peter Moo. That's just because he has a very similar body shape to Morgan's and is also wearing a feathered hat. Then there is Momora, who also wears a hat that is strangely shaped like a bird's hat. There is Moon Isaac Jr., who has this beak-shaped nose and who might be based on Sir Isaac Newton, who discovered gravity, you know, opposed to flight, maybe. And finally, there is Spencer, who I really just threw in here because he looks pretty much like a male version of Nami, and I just wanted to kind of mention that because it's kind of odd. Another idea that I've seen thrown around is that Morgan might have been the thing inside the giant egg here that was on board of the Roger Pirate's ship. However, that is a whole different beast, I personally think, and if you really want to know what it is, you can't miss out on that video right here.